The Bear's Son, from Serbian Fairy Tales, 1918, public domain. A bear married a woman, and they had one son. When the boy was yet a little fellow, he begged very hard to be allowed to leave the bear's cave and go into the world to see what was in it. His father, the bear, however, would not consent to this, saying, "You are too young yet, and not strong enough. In the world there are multitudes of wicked beasts called men, who will kill you." So the boy was quieted for a while and remained in the cave. But after some time, the boy prayed so earnestly that the bear, his father, would let him go into the world. The bear brought him into the wood, showed him a beech tree, saying, "If you can pull up that beech by the roots, I will let you go. But if you cannot, then this is a proof that you are still too weak, and you must remain with me." The boy tried to pull the tree up, but after a long trying had to give up and go home again to the cave. Again some time passed, and he then begged again to be allowed to go into the world. His father told him, as before, if he could pull up the beech tree, he might go out into the world. This time the boy pulled up the tree, so the bear consented to let him go. However, he had to first cut away the branches from the beech so that he might use the trunk for a club. The boy now started on his journey, carrying the trunk of the beech over his shoulder as a club. One day, as the bear's son was journeying, he came to a field where he found hundreds of plowmen working for their master. He asked them to give him something to eat, and they told him to wait a bit till their dinner was brought to them. Then he could have some, for they said, "Where so many are dining, one mouth or less matters but little." Whilst they were speaking, there came carts, horses, mules, and asses, all carrying the dinner. But when the meats were spread out, the bear's son declared he could eat it all for himself. The workmen wondered greatly at his words, not believing it possible that one man could consume as great a variety of victuals as would satisfy several hundred men. This, however, the bear's son persisted in affirming he could do, and offered to bet with them that he could. He proposed that the stakes should be all the iron of their plowshares and other agricultural implements. To this they assented. No sooner had they made the wager than he fell upon the provisions, and in a short time consumed the whole. Not a fragment was left. Hereupon the laborers, in accordance with their wager, gave him all the iron which they possessed. When the bear's son had collected all the iron, he tore up a young birch tree, twisted it into a band, and tied up the iron into a bundle, with which he hung at the end of his staff, and throwing it across his shoulder, trudged off from the astonished and affrighted laborers. Going on a short distance, he arrived at a forge in which a blacksmith was employed making a plowshare. This man he requested to make him a mace with the iron that he was carrying. This the smith undertook to do, but putting aside half the iron, he made of the rest a small, coarsely finished mace. The bear's son saw at a glance that he had been cheated by the blacksmith. Moreover, he was disgusted at the roughness of the workmanship. He, however, took it and declared his intention of testing it. Then, fastening it to the end of his club, and throwing it high into the air above the clouds, he stood still and allowed it to fall upon his shoulder. It had no sooner struck him than the mace shattered into fragments, some of which fell on and destroyed the forge. Taking up his staff, the bear's son reproached the blacksmith for his dishonesty and killed the blacksmith on the spot. Having collected the whole of the iron, the bear's son went to another blacksmith and desired that the blacksmith whom he found there to make him a mace, saying to him, "Please, play no tricks on me. I bring you these fragments of iron for you to make me a mace. Beware that you do not attempt to cheat me as I was cheated before." As the blacksmith had heard what had happened to the other blacksmith, he collected his workpeople, threw all the iron on his fire, and welded the whole together, and made a large mace of perfect workmanship. Tied up the iron into a bundle, with which he hung at the end of his staff. Illustration. When it was fastened on the head of his club, the bear's son, to prove it, threw it high in the air and caught it on his back. This time the mace did not break, but rebounded. Then the bear's son got up and said, "This work is well done," and putting it on his shoulder walked away. A little further on he came to a field wherein a man was plowing with 2 oxen, and he went up to him and asked him for something to eat. The man said, "I expect every moment my daughter to come with my chicken. Then we shall see what God has given us." The bear's son told him how he had eaten up all the dinner prepared for many hundreds of plowmen, and asked, "From a dinner prepared for one person, how much can you come to me or to you?" Meanwhile the girl brought the chicken dinner. The moment she put it down, the bear's son stretched out his hand to begin to eat, but the man stopped him. "No," said he, "you must first say grace as I do." The bear's son, hungry as he was, obeyed, and having said grace, they both began to eat. The bear's son, looking at the girl who brought the dinner, she was a tall, strong, beautiful girl, became very fond of her, and said to the father, "Will you give me your daughter for a wife?" The man answered, "I would give her to you very gladly, but I have promised her already to the mustached." The bear's son exclaimed, "What do I care for Mustachio? I have my mace for him." But the man answered, "Hush, hush. Mustachio is also somebody. You will see him here shortly." Shortly after, a noise was heard from afar, off and low. Behind a hill a mustache showed itself, and in it there were 365 bird nests. Shortly after appeared the other mustache, and then came Mustachio himself. Having reached them, he lay down on the ground immediately to rest. He put his head on the girl's knee and told her to scratch his head a little. The girl obeyed him, and the bear's son, getting up, struck him with the club. Whereupon Mustachio, pointing to the place where with his finger, said, "Huh, something has bitten me here." The bear's son struck him again with the mace on another spot, and Mustachio again pointed to the place, saying to the girl, "Huh, has a mosquito bitten me here?" When he was struck a third time, he said to the girl angrily, Look you, some insect bites me here. Then the girl said, Nothing has bitten you. A man has struck you with a mace. When Mustachio heard this, he jumped up, but the bear's son had thrown away his mace and run away. Mustachio pursued him, and though the bear's son was lighter than he, and had gained the start of him a considerable distance, he would not give up pursuing him. At length the bear's son, in the course of his flight, came to a wide river, and found near it some men threshing corn. Help me, my brothers, help for God's sake, he cried. Help! Mustachio is pursuing me. What shall I do? How can I get across the river? One of the men stretched out his shovel, saying, Here, sit down on my shovel, and I will throw you over the river. The bear's son sat on the shovel, and the man threw him over the water. He landed on the other shore. Soon after, Mustachio came up and asked, Has anyone passed here? The threshers replied that a man had passed. Mustachio demanded, How did he cross the river? They answered, He jumped over the river. Then Mustachio went back a little to take a start, and with a hop, he sprang to the other side of the river and continued to pursue the bear's son. Meanwhile, this last, running hastily up a hill, got very tired. At the top of the hill, he found a man sowing, and the sack with seeds was hanging from his back. Every handful of seed sown in the ground, the man put a handful in his mouth and ate them. The bear's son shouted to him, Help me, brother, help me, for God's sake. Mustachio is following me and will soon catch me. Hide me somewhere. Then the man said, Indeed, it is no joke to have Mustachio pursuing you, but I have nowhere to hide you, unless it is in this sack among my seeds. So he put him in the sack. When Mustachio came up to the sower, he asked him if he had seen the bear's son anywhere. The man replied, Yes, he has passed by here long ago, and God knows where he has got to before this. Then Mustachio went back again. By and by, the sower forgot that the bear's son was in his sack, and he took with him out a handful of seeds and put them in his mouth. The bear's son was afraid of being swallowed by the sower, so he looked around the mouth quickly, and seeing a hollow tooth of his, hid himself inside the tooth of the sower. When the sower returned home in the evening, he called to his sister-in-law, Children, give me my toothpick. There is something in my broken tooth. The sisters-in-law brought him 2 iron picks, and standing one on each side, they poked about with the 2 picks in his ill tooth. And suddenly, the shrunken bear's son jumped out. Then the man remembered him and said, Oh, what bad luck you have. I nearly swallowed you. After that, they had taken supper and talked about many different things, till at last the bear's son asked what had happened to break that one tooth, whilst the other teeth were all strong and healthy. The man told him in these words, Once there were 10 of us and 30 horses, and we started to the seashore to buy some salt. We found a girl in a field watching sheep, and she asked us where we were going. We said we were going to the seashore to buy salt. She said, Why go so far? I have in the bag in my hand here some salt, which remained over after feeding my sheep. I think it will be enough for you. We settled on a price, and then she took the salt from her bag. Whilst she took the sacks from the 30 horses, we weighed the salt and filled the sack with it till all 30 sacks were full. We then paid the girl and returned home. It was a very fine autumn day, but as we were crossing a high mountain, the sky became very cloudy and it began to snow. There was a cold north wind, so that we could not see our path, and we wandered about here and there. At last, by good luck, one of us shouted, "Here, brothers, here is a dry place." So we went in one after the other till we were all. With our horses we were all under shelter. We took the sacks from the horse, made a good fire, and passed the night there, as if it were a house. The next morning, just think what we saw. We were all in one man's head, which lay in the midst of some vineyards. And whilst we were yet wondering and loading our horses, the keeper of the vineyards came and picked the head up. He put it in a sling, and slinging it about several times, threw it over his head and cast it far away over the vines to frighten the starlings away from his grapes. So we rolled down a hill, and it was then that I broke my tooth.